The stage lights burn hot at the Sands Casino. Dean Martin stands at the microphone, whiskey in hand, that trademark smile playing at his lips. The room, packed with high rollers, showgirls, and Vegas royalty, buzzes with anticipation. Then he sees them, front row, 3 men in impeccable suits, men everyone in this town knows, men nobody crosses. The enforcer in the center doesn't clap, doesn't smile, just stares. A message as clear as desert sky. The band holds a note, waiting. Dean's pianist glances back, eyes wide. Every dealer in the casino has stopped mid-shuffle. Frank's not here tonight. Sammy's not here. Dean's alone. And what he does in the next 60 seconds will either make him untouchable or destroy everything he's built. Nobody saw this coming. Las Vegas, 1965. The city glitters like fool's gold in the Nevada desert, but everyone knows who really owns the Neon Kingdom. Not the casino bosses with their flashy suits, not the politicians with their hollow promises. The mob controls Vegas. Every card dealt, every slot machine, every stage where America's biggest stars perform. The Chicago outfit, the 5 families, they all have their fingers in this golden pie. Dean Martin was Rat Pack royalty, the cool one, the effortless one. While Frank Sinatra commands and Sammy Davis Jr. dazzles, Dean just is. He makes 100 million people believe he's half drunk and couldn't care less, when in reality, he's sharp as a tack and more calculated than a card counter. His shows at the Sands sell out weeks in advance. His records go platinum. He's untouchable. Or so it seems. Because in Vegas, nobody's truly untouchable, not when you're standing on a stage financed by money that came from places the IRS will never find, not when the men in the front row decide they want something from you. And on this particular night, those men want more than a song. They want compliance, respect, control. They're about to get something else entirely. The Sands Hotel and Casino opened in 1952, backed what the newspapers politely called Texas oil money. Everyone in the industry knew better. The Sands was connected, deeply, irreversibly connected to the same families that ran Chicago, New York, and Kansas City. By the early 60s, it had become the crown jewel of the Strip, and the Rat Pack made it legendary. Dean Martin's relationship with Vegas was complicated from the start. He wasn't naive like some Hollywood transplants who wandered into town thinking their fame protected them. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, steel mill country, where mobsters weren't movie villains, but neighbors who controlled the unions and the gambling. His real name was Dino Paul Crescetti. His family knew people. He understood the rules. Rule number 1, you can be friendly with them, but you never work for them. Rule number 2, you never embarrass them in public. Rule number 3, when they ask for a favor, you deliver, or you make damn sure they understand why you can't. Dean had walked this tightrope for years. He'd take photos with certain businessmen, but never at their private parties. He'd acknowledge them at shows, but never dedicated songs. He kept the line clear, professional, distant enough to maintain independence, close enough to avoid problems. But lines have a way of blurring in Las Vegas. The troubles started 3 weeks before that fateful show. A sit-down, not official, just a conversation at the lounge after Dean's Friday performance. Anthony the Ant Spilatro, a rising enforcer for the Chicago outfit, a man whose reputation preceded him like thunder before lightning, had approached with 2 associates. "Great show, Dean. Really great." "Thanks, pal. Glad you enjoyed it." "We got a proposition. Friend of ours, his daughter's getting married, big affair. We'd love for you to make an appearance, sing a couple songs, 20 minutes tops." This was the moment, the ask, the kind of request that sounded simple but came with invisible strings. Dean had dealt with these before. You say yes, suddenly you're on call, you're an asset. Next time it's not a wedding, it's a private party for men doing business they don't want recorded. Then it's a favor for a friend of a friend. Then you're in so deep you can't see daylight. "When's the wedding?" Dean asked, his voice casual, buying time. "June 15th. "Ah, hell, I'm contracted for the Sands that whole week. Can't break it. You know how these casino bosses are." He smiled, that million-dollar smile that had melted resistance for 2 decades. Spilatro didn't smile back. We know your contract. We also know the Sands is flexible when it matters. Translation, we own this place. We own the people who sign your checks. Dean took a slow sip of his drink. I'd love to help, Anthony, but my contract's ironclad. My managers, my lawyers, they'd have my head. I break it, I'm liable for damages that'd make your eyes water. Not entirely true, but close enough. That's so? Spilotro's tone hadn't changed, but something had shifted in his eyes. A coldness, a calculation. Shame. The family was really looking forward to it. Give the bride my congratulations. I'll send a gift. Something memorable. The conversation ended. Handshakes, smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. But Dean knew. He'd just drawn a line, and men like Spilotro didn't forget when someone drew lines. What he didn't know was that Spilotro had made a decision that night. A demonstration was needed. Not violence, too messy, too much attention. Something more elegant, more public. A reminder that in Las Vegas, even kings performed for the men who built the throne. The stage was set for a confrontation nobody saw coming. The night arrives like any other Vegas Saturday. The Copa Room at the Sands thrums with energy. Cigarette smoke curling toward chandelier lights, the clink of champagne glasses, women in sequin dresses that catch every reflection. Dean's show is scheduled for 10 p.m. By 9:30, every seat is filled, standing room only at the bar. Dean's in his dressing room, casual as ever. Black tuxedo, perfectly tailored. A rocks glass with 2 fingers of what everyone assumes is whiskey but is actually apple juice. The public persona of the boozy crooner is exactly that. A persona. He's running through the set list with his conductor when there's a knock. Yeah? The stage manager cracks the door. His face is pale. Dean, you got some VIP arrivals. Front row center. That's what front row center is for, pal. It's Spilotro, and he brought friends. Dean sets down his glass, slowly. He meets the stage manager's eyes and sees genuine fear there. This isn't normal. When made men attended shows, they called ahead, arrangements were made, security was briefed. This was a message. How many? 6, maybe 7. They moved a party of 8 that had reservations, paid them off right there, cash. Dean nods. His mind races through options. Cancel the show? That's surrender. Play it normal? That might work, or might give them exactly the opening they want. He thinks about Frank. Frank would confront it head-on, probably make a joke that it either diffused the situation or escalated to violence. Sammy would charm his way through. But Dean had built his entire career on being unflappable. The man, nothing bothered. Time to prove it. All right, let's give them a show. He walks out at 10:03 p.m., fashionably late, as always. The band launches into That's Amore. The crowd erupts. Dean strolls to the microphone like he's walking through his living room. Smooth, effortless. He doesn't look at the front row. Not yet. He croons through the first verse. The room's eating it up. Then, as the song builds, he lets his gaze drift down. Front row center. There they are. Spilotro in the middle, stone-faced. The men flanking him mirror his expression. No applause, no smiles. Just presence. A void in a room full of joy. Dean doesn't miss a note. He finishes the song to thunderous applause, takes a small bow, sips from his glass on the piano. How you doing, everybody? Beautiful crowd tonight, just beautiful. His voice is warm honey. You know, I was gonna sing Everybody Loves Somebody, but then I looked around and thought, well, almost everybody. Laughter ripples through the audience, everyone except front row center. He moves into Ain't That a Kick in the Head. Halfway through, during the instrumental bridge, he does something unexpected. He walks off the stage, down the steps, into the audience, closer to the tables. The crowd loves it. Dean Martin, right there, within touching distance. But Dean's heading somewhere specific. He's heading to front row center. The room's energy shifts. The musicians sense it, keep playing, but their eyes are locked on their boss. Security guards along the walls tense. Everyone who knows anything about Vegas power dynamics feels it. This is the moment, the collision. Dean stops right in front of Spilatro's table. He's still singing, but his eyes are locked on the enforcers. For a measure, 2 measures, they stare at each other. The entire Copa room holds its breath. Then Dean does something nobody expects. He extends his hand, offering the microphone. "Come on, pal, you know the words. Help me out." The room freezes. This isn't in the script. This isn't how it works. Entertainers perform. Mobsters watch. Those are the roles. Dean Martin just ripped up the script. Spilatro stares at the microphone. His associates shift in their seats, confused. Is this mockery, disrespect, or something else entirely? The silence stretches. 3 seconds, 4, 5, an eternity in a performance. The band keeps the melody going, softer now, waiting. Then Spilatro does something equally unexpected. He smiles. Not a warm smile, not a genuine smile, but a smile that says, "I see what you're doing." He doesn't take the microphone. Instead, he picks up his whiskey glass, a real whiskey, not apple juice, and raises it. A toast. To Dean. To the game they're playing. To the acknowledgement that Dean just turned a power move into a public moment that can't be answered with violence or threats. Because what's he gonna do? Beat up the guy who just tried to include him in the show? Refuse the microphone and look weak in front of 400 witnesses? Spilatro's been checkmated, and he knows it. More importantly, he respects it. Dean raises his own glass in return, still holding the microphone, still in complete control of the room. He brings the mic back to his lips and finishes the verse. The tension shatters like dropped crystal. The audience, most of whom didn't fully understand what just happened but felt every second of it, explodes in applause. Dean returns to the stage. The show continues, but something fundamental has shifted. After the 3rd song, during his banter, Dean tells a story. "You know, my old man used to say, 'Dino, there's 2 kinds of people in this world. People who want something from you, and people who just want to enjoy the show.'" He pauses, takes a sip, lets the words hang. "I prefer the second kind. But hey, I'm a performer. I'm here for everybody." The audience laughs. Front row center doesn't, but they're listening. Dean continues his set. Songs, stories, jokes. He doesn't reference the moment again directly. He doesn't need to. Every person in the Copa room, from the cocktail waitresses to the pit bosses to the men in the front row, understood what happened. Dean Martin had been tested, and he'd responded not with defiance or submission, but with something more powerful. He'd controlled the narrative. He'd made it public. He'd turned a threat into a performance. And in doing so, he'd proven something Spilatro's bosses already suspected. Dean Martin couldn't be owned. You could threaten him, you could pressure him, but you couldn't control him. Because his power didn't come from fear or force. It came from his ability to make everyone, including mobsters, feel like they were part of his world, on his terms. The show ends at 11:47 p.m. Dean takes his bows to a standing ovation. As he exits stage left, he catches one more glimpse of the front row. Spilatro and his men are standing, but they're not applauding. They're just watching, acknowledging. Then they turn and walk out, leaving their barely touched drinks on the table. In the dressing room, Dean's manager bursts in, face flushed. "What the hell was that? Do you have any idea what you just did?" Dean loosens his bow tie, pours himself a real drink this time. "I did my job. I entertained." "You handed a microphone to Anthony Spilatro in front of 400 people. You made him look—" "I made him look like what? A guy at a show? That's what he was.
That's what I made sure everyone saw." Dean's voice is calm, but there's steel underneath. "You give men like that power in the shadows, they'll use it. You drag it into the light, suddenly they have to play by different rules." His manager paces, running hands through his hair. "You better hope they see it that way." "They will, because they're smarter than you think." And Dean was right. Within 2 days, word filtered back through the network of cocktail waitresses, pit bosses, and connected guys who kept the Vegas grapevine humming. The sit-down had been called. The bosses in Chicago had heard about the incident, not from Spilotro, from a dozen other sources who'd been at the show or heard from someone who had. The verdict? Dean Martin had handled himself with respect. He didn't refuse the request directly in front of witnesses. He didn't embarrass anyone. He'd offered a gesture, a symbolic inclusion that allowed everyone to save face while maintaining his boundary. It was, in the language of that world, a classy move. More importantly, it demonstrated something valuable. Dean couldn't be leveraged. Threatening him didn't work because he'd find a way to flip the script, to turn private pressure into public spectacle where he controlled the optics. And the last thing organized crime wanted was public spectacles that might attract federal attention. The wedding came and went. Dean didn't attend. Nobody asked again. But the story spread. In the tight ecosystem of Las Vegas entertainment and organized crime, it became legend. The night Dean Martin gave the microphone to the mob. Different versions emerged. Some said Spilotro had laughed and sung a verse. Others claimed harsh words were exchanged backstage. But the core truth remained. Dean had been tested and had passed in a way that earned respect rather than retaliation. Frank Sinatra heard about it. When he saw Dean next, he just shook his head and laughed. "You got more balls than brains, Pally, but that was beautiful, absolutely beautiful." Sammy Davis Jr.'s reaction was more effusive. "Man, I would have tap-danced my way out of that situation and still ended up owing them a favor. You turned it into theater. That's genius." For Dean, it wasn't genius. It was survival instinct honed over decades of navigating worlds where the rules weren't written down, but everyone knew them anyway. He'd grown up around men of that life. He understood their codes, respect, face, the difference between public and private. He'd played to those codes while simultaneously exposing them to light that rendered them powerless. But the impact went beyond just that one incident. After that night, Dean Martin's status in Las Vegas changed. The invisible leash that kept every performer in line, the understanding that ultimately you performed at the pleasure of men who controlled the money, loosened for him. Not completely. This was still Vegas, but Dean had carved out a zone of autonomy that few entertainers ever achieved. When the FBI later investigated mob control of Las Vegas casinos, leading to the eventual corporate takeover of the Strip in the 1970s and 80s, they interviewed dozens of performers about their experiences. Most were terrified to talk. Some had stories of being strong-armed into free performances, into using their fame to legitimize criminals, into situations they couldn't escape.
Dean Martin's name barely appears in those investigations. Not because he wasn't there, he was at the center of the Vegas entertainment scene, but because he'd established boundaries early and defended them in ways that made him more trouble than he was worth to control. Years later, after the Sands was sold and the Rat Pack era became nostalgia, a journalist asked Dean about the rumors. The stories of confrontations with mobsters, the legends of him standing up to organized crime. Dean, in his 70s by then, gave that same crooked smile that had diffused 1,000 tense moments. "I don't know about all that. I just showed up, sang my songs, and tried to make people happy. If there were tough guys in the audience, well, they paid for tickets same as everyone else. I treated them the same." The journalist pressed, "But the stories about—" "Kid, let me tell you something about stories. In Vegas, everybody's got one. Most of them are half true on a good day. But I'll tell you what is true. I never sang a note I didn't want to sing. I never performed somewhere I didn't choose to be. And I went home every night knowing I didn't owe anybody anything except a good show. That's the only story that matters. It was the most honest answer he ever gave about those years. Between the lines, those who knew how to read it understood. Dean Martin had faced down the Vegas mob, not with guns or lawyers or even Frank Sinatra's notorious temper. He'd done it with a microphone, a spotlight, and the understanding that public performance was a kind of power that even the most dangerous men couldn't fully control. The Copa Room at the Sands Hotel closed in 1988. The building was imploded in 1996, reduced to rubble and dust to make room for the new Vegas, corporate, sanitized, Disney-friendly. But the stories remain. The legends of a time when the city had teeth, when danger and glamour danced under the same spotlight. Dean Martin died in 1995, 1 year before the Sands fell. He never wrote a memoir, never explained fully what happened that night or any of the other nights when worlds collided on stage. He didn't need to. His legacy wasn't in explanations, it was in the impossible balance he maintained for decades. A man who remained himself in a city designed to own you. He walked into the lion's den every night, handed them the microphone, and walked out untouched. That's not luck. That's legend. That's Dean Martin. Cool, untouchable, forever. Stories like this built the legend of old Hollywood. If you want more untold tales from Vegas's golden era, the moments that made icons untouchable, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Who's the coolest rat packer? Let's keep these legends alive. See you next time.